into the live. We'll be on 5 platforms today. So yeah, there's a lot of crossover, Michelle, between our audiences. It's great to see these truth, love, and freedom advocates coming together and really appreciating each other. That's something I love about the quote unquote, well, I don't even like to call it alternative media because the alternative media has become the mainstream media. But you know, our sort of underground media, if you will, everyone supports everyone for the most part and promotes, if as long as it's resonating in truth, right? We promote each other, we back each other up, we support each other, because that's how living in honor and living according to natural design works. So it's
We
truly
are not alternative media. We are the cool guys.
I like it. Well, hey,
Awesome.
we're live. Hey, everybody in the chat. Appreciate you guys who were here with Michelle. I'm going to hit record and we're going to fire up the podcast. Here we go. Just get my settings. Here we go. And boom, we're back for another episode of Alfacast. I'm Mike Winner, and I'm here as always with the ineffable Dr. Bear Paul Lando, coming to you live and direct from the great state of Jefferson, where freedom reigns supreme, up here on the Smith River, enjoying a rather cool August. I'm even dressed kind of looking like it's fall right now. It's been in the high 60s, low 70s the last couple of weeks. Gardens loving it. Boys wishing it was warmer for the river, but we've been hitting the surf. Bear, they had an epic week last week of junior lifeguards. It was really fun to see them do that again. And yeah, just loving life here in the great outdoors of the lower PNW. And really looking forward to today's chat as we uncover the true histories of mankind and this great nation that we reside in. Very excited about that. I will be taking off for the other side of the world on Monday, going out to the Living Free Festival. If you guys are in that neck of the woods and still haven't bought your tickets, you can go to livingfreefestival.org. Use the code Alfa Vedic for your discount, and I hope to see you guys there. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'm DJing Friday night, and then on my birthday there, I'm doing a talk on the currency of experience, and that's going to be phenomenal out there. And then, yeah, we've got Bear's talk from Music and Sky up on the platform now. Check that out. And actually, Paula Pratt's talk is dropping, I believe, today. And so, yeah, we'll be dripping out content from Music and Sky throughout the next few weeks. So,
and you and I have a talk together tomorrow on some platform. I don't know who or what, but you're more up on that stuff. So who is it?
Trent Wellness Force, a big podcast in the alt health world. We'll be going on his podcast. That's going to be exciting, dipping deep into everything we're all about on the terrain side, and well, just everything we do, and how you know, we try to embody health, because what I always say, Bear, is health is freedom. Without health, you don't have freedom, and so we embody that in all aspects and elements of our life.
So are we going to be able to talk freely on that? I don't know much about their broadcasts, or are we allowed to say that everything they tell us is a bunch of malarkey?
Oh no, Trent's super dialed in. Yep, was
cool.
very vocal during the coronation debacle.
Oh, awesome.
2020.
That'll be fun. We can let it rip then. So take it away, Mike.
Okay,
I want to hear from Michelle today.
Excited about today's show. Going down the memory hole with Micelle Gibson as this era of no more secrets continues to unfold. We are witnessing one surrealistic revelation after another, but nothing is more incredulous to the average intellect than the alteration of our history and timelines in their entirety. Special guest Micelle Gibson joins Alfacast this week to take us on a journey through the mists of academic fabrication, to uncloak the reality of civilizations long forgotten, and not even that long forgotten. Quote, "A man without any history is like a tree without roots." That is from Malcolm X. Micelle Gibson is not your typical forensic historian, however. Utilizing a template of sacred geometry well known to the architects of past civilizations, she follows the gridlines to uncover the evolutionary path of our predecessors. Micelle was born in July of 1963 and raised outside of Washington, D.C. in Montgomery County, Maryland. and received her bachelor's degree in social work and psychology from the University of Maryland in Baltimore Country in 1989. Having lived in many different places and traveled extensively, she firmly believes there would be no mysteries in history if we'd been told the truth. Fascinated by megaliths most of her life, her journey has led her to uncovering hidden keys. After finding a star tetrahedron on the North American continent by connecting the dots of major cities and extended the lines out, she traced the cities that lined up primarily in circular and linear fashion to find amazing locations with remarkable similarities across countries. Micelle shares her revelation of a suppressed and ancient worldwide civilization while exposing those responsible for hiding this reality in plain sight. We'll discuss evidence of an extensive Moorish civilization with its roots in ancient Mu and Atlantis, responsible for building the world's infrastructure. With different empires within an empire, the Washita, Phoenician, Tartarian, Barbarian, Ottoman, just to name a few. But one beautiful, elegant, and integrated, unified, and worldwide civilization that was deliberately removed from our collective memory for the purpose of the power and control of the few, who definitely do not have our best interests at heart. We love doing these kind of shows, Bear, as we were talking in the pre-chat, health and wellness. In order to truly embody that, you must know where you come from. You must know who you are. Yep. Take it away, my friend.
Okay, Michelle, so wonderful to have you here. And when I was writing that up yesterday, I found that quote from Malcolm X, who was one of the great ones, in my opinion. When I was playing ball, my roommate on the team was president of the Black Student Union, and what people in this time period don't understand is it was much different than Black Lives Matter. We were all getting together, all on the same page philosophically. And of course, it was all usurped, just like alternative media, as we were talking about, has been usurped. I'm really, really looking forward to this. And I wanted to share just a couple, personal experiences. When I was in Hawaii, I worked very closely with a worldwide sovereignty movement where peoples all over the world were getting together. And I worked with an ancient kahuna line who all considered themselves descendants of Mu, which I believe you might get into a little bit today. And we're also affiliated with the Washita tribe in Louisiana. And in fact, I'll just show you a couple things just for grins. This is my old ID from the Washita Nation that handsome devil there was me decades ago. And
was that when you were on Miami Vice, Bear?
No, I think it's, oh no, I better not say that one. So anyway, and then also, birth certificate from the Washita Nation. And the Washita people, of course, for people that don't know, understand their roots were from the Moors, which I think you're going to be maybe touching on a bit today, Michelle. And they also looked at the earth as, one solid landmass at one time. They also understood the earth was a plane and not a globe. And then when there was continental drift away from what they consider the one continent that was really rooted in the ground, Africa, America was populated by the Moors, the descendants of Mu, and very careful also to explain that blacks living in North America weren't all descendants from slaves, but were actually here a long, long, long time ago. So, all good stuff. And I've just been fascinated with that whole history ever since I became very intimately involved with the Washita people and heard a lot of their oral traditions directly from the mouth of their empress. Because they're very matriarchal. And not in a feminist sense, but indigenous people understood that women were the core, just like in biological medicine. I understand things get really bad in the body when the yin core gets involved, then you have serious chronic disease. And that is why the globalists have brought women into the more external environment in the business sense and the whole feminist movement in order to destroy us and take away that our matriarchal roots, which were the roots of all people at one time. So, Micelle, I just thought that'd be kind of fun to get things off. Now, one thing I'm really interested in also is your use of sacred geometry to connect the ley lines and, all these, different connections between places on the globe. So, is that a good place for us to start, or do you have another place you think would make more sense?
No, that's perfect. And actually, what I've pulled up pretty much fits right in with your introduction of me. And it sounds like a tall order, but I do have the receipts from 6 years of extensive research and a really strong belief that there's something here. There's real information here that just constantly gets reaffirmed as I continue to research and go deeper and deeper into it. I've been updating some earlier work that I did, and with what I've learned in the time since then, I can just add more layers to it. And I'm so glad you already are familiar with the Washita Moors, because they remain in place names. Monroe is in Washita Parish on the Washita River near the Washita Mountains, and you find the name Washita throughout that part of North America. Essentially, if you look at what the Louisiana Purchase looks like, it's the shape of the Washita Empire map. And there were other Moorish peoples here, but the Empress Veridiasi, who passed away, I believe, in 2014, published several books. One is Return of the Ancient Ones. And I want to talk about that part of my journey. I was living in Oklahoma when I really started waking up to the Moors. But I want to go back to that after I've had a chance to talk to it, because they've just been removed from everything. I mean, you hear about other empires, and I think they're a fabricated version, because I don't see these empires at odds with each other like the narrative we've received.
Can I say one? Sorry to interrupt just this one time. My experience with the Washita and their whole philosophy was one of love and harmony between all peoples and all races and all cultures. And that is why they opened up their nation to accept citizenship, which I used myself. I used to successfully open up trust bank accounts and, drive with my Washita driver's license. And back before Gestapo 2.0 was installed, it actually flowed or flied, because they were recognized on the world stage as a legitimate nation. So sorry, go ahead.
They're beautiful people. Humanity was at a much higher level of consciousness before the hijack of the timeline happened, and whatever destroyed the surface of the earth, which I definitely have opinions about at this point, again, from my research, is along ley lines. That's where it all started for me. But we were at a much, much higher level of consciousness, and the controllers don't want humans functioning at a high level of consciousness, and a consciousness of love and peace and reconciliation. They want confused and misinformed and miseducated people that they can control. And so there's really a lot to this story, and it's work that I'm absolutely compelled to do, so people know that we've been lied to and how we've been lied to. And I have good pattern recognition skills, so I like to show the same kind of styles in different places, side by side, and present it in a way that people can come to their own conclusions, or at least see why I came to the ones that I did. And every once in a while, I'll insert my opinion into my work as to what I think happened. But a lot of times I like to show people, go through, like when I was researching cities and places in alignment on these ley lines that I found, show people this is, this is in China and this is in Oklahoma,
Yeah.
same, that kind of thing. And really encourage people to not blindly accept what we've been told, because we've been conditioned in so many ways. Our thoughts have been conditioned, our perceptions have been conditioned. So we don't question the evidence that's all around us. And think for have people really start looking in their own communities and think for themselves and ask questions, do your own research locally, because this there's no place that this isn't. It's in your courthouses, in your libraries, in your, if you have an old theater or opera house in your community, or museum or school. If you went to a school that looked like a castle, guess what? It wasn't built in 1910 with huge doors, and a lot of those are gone. They've been destroyed, but there's still some around. There's quite a few in Oklahoma City where the middle schools and the high schools are old world architecture. And that's just one example, but that was where I started waking up to this. But let me, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and, well, actually, let me give some background and then I'll share my screen. So
Awesome.
my degree's in social work and psychology. I went after I was in the service. So I graduated from high school in 1981. I joined the Army in 1982, and I served from 1982 to 1986. And so that started my path away from where I was born and raised in Gaithersburg, Rockville, Maryland area, Montgomery County. And that's significant. It was a good place to grow up at that time. I think they're like a sanctuary county now, but when I was growing up, it was a really good place to live, affluent, really good educational system, and a lot of this hidden history around me. And so, like the house that I lived in for about 10 years before I left home was right next to a golf course. And as I started waking up to all of this, I realized it was like a flat top pyramid, and that there were all these earthworks around me growing up that I didn't recognize as such until I started to come into awareness of this information that I'm sharing today. I can't tell you how many times I've been to Harper's Ferry or Washington, D.C., or, any of these places with this monumental architecture. Baltimore. I went to college outside of Baltimore. So like everybody else, it never even crossed my mind. And you just accept it. Okay. We're not told about anything in our history other than, like, let's use the United States as an example, American Revolution, Civil War, Great Depression, all this stuff. And so I didn't question that until within the last, let's say, 15 years or so, even 10 years. But I've always been aware, and I've always been interested, as far back as I can remember, in alternative stuff. And so I well remember Unsolved Mysteries and remember when Chariots of the Gods came out, but I wasn't particularly in tune with that. But I remember it coming out. I mean, that was kind of what was available back then. So Unsolved Mysteries, In Search of, Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. I was really into that kind of thing. Curious about history's mysteries. And I would notice things that I, didn't have any context for, but, things at Harper's Ferry, or I've been to the C&O Canal many times. The Great Falls Park was probably 10 miles from where I lived. So I went there a lot as a kid. And the canal there, because, you know, canals are original infrastructure, railroads were original infrastructure. You know, these were things that, as, you know, again, as I was exploring the ley lines, I was, you know, compiling the evidence, you know, canal, railroad, you know, Star Fort nearby. And, you know, it's, having researched now, like I said, for 6 years, it's like I've got a lot of information that I've compiled in my blog, piercingtheveil.com. And then originally when I started doing this, I was just going to make one video. I'm more comfortable as a writer, and I was just going to blog. And somebody signed up for my, or subscribed to my YouTube channel. This was back in June of 2018. And I thought, well, geez, I better make videos now. Somebody's subscribed. And so I realized it would be easy for me to turn my blog posts into videos. And so I started doing that, you know, as I was getting started in 2018. And I've had I certainly had a far greater reach through YouTube with this information, but I do have it in both forms. You know, somebody likes to read, I've got it there as well. And so I start my research as a blog post, and then I convert it. And so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Before I go do that, are there any questions?
I was just going to say what's still mind-boggling to me is how all of these structures and technologies that were actually visualized by prior generations are just wiped from the memory banks. And we're, you know, at this moment, just totally clueless to them. Well, you know, we're starting to understand again, but how the heck were they so thoroughly able to erase these memories?
I'll go into it because that's another piece of the puzzle, which is the intentional mind control and brainwashing program
Awesome.
that we've been under. And, you know, again, I'll go into it, but when you think about the amount of psychological abuse that we've been subjected to get us conditioned into fear, and, you know, other ways that this psychological abuse has taken place. And interestingly, Mike, I had pulled up something on this surrealist movement. And so when you mention the word surreal, you know, I've got something to present there as well.
Salvador Dali was an interesting character, to say the least.
Yes, that's what I pulled up. You know, this breaking of our minds, which is what they've been doing intentionally, so that we wouldn't know up from down and right from wrong, and, you know, accept all the garbage that they're throwing at us, so we would be controllable and malleable for their ultimate agenda, which is transhumanism and completely changing us from who we are, our organic selves. And this is a real existential threat. So, you know, when we get down into quibbling about details about the shape of the earth, and I do not see the earth as round. I didn't have an opinion when I started. I've got evidence that, you know, that was tampered with along with everything else. I got that. But, you know, we get so polarized so easily on these details when they're trying to wipe us out. You know, when you really get down to it, the only purpose our divisions are serving is to feed their need for negative emotional states from us. And they rig the whole system.
They're farming us
to harvest our energy. That is what we're dealing with.
That's why, you know, on our channel, we try to bring a lot of people together. I share a lot of the belief systems of people that we, you know, not all of them, but a lot of the with people that come on our podcast. But it's like, let's stop arguing with each other about, I mean, really polarizing things. Some people that I respect very much are at each other's throats, and we're just playing into it. So let's just share information. And one thing we can all agree on is everything we've been told is a bunch of bullshit. So let's start from there.
Yeah.
And
So I'm
ask
going to go,
why we've been fed that line.
yeah, this is a non-human force that is behind it. And they've, again, they've rigged the whole entire system to benefit them alone. And we are just the energy sources to get them to where they want to go. And then we are gone. And that was the plan. Now, I'm an optimist. I'm not sharing that because I'm afraid that they're going to get away with it. I don't believe that. I do not believe they're going to get away with their heinous crimes against humanity. But that was the direction that we were heading. And so, there's a lot of reasons that I spend my time doing this, but it's like to get this information out that I found that I feel is relevant and show people that we've been lied to, how we've been lied to, why we've been lied to. And again, get people, encourage people to think for themselves. Just stop blindly accepting what the 6 o'clock newscaster says, or, whatever else, Good Morning America or whatever. Pick your.
Well, and one other takeaway, Michelle, is we are so powerful that they had to go to this degree of effort to control us.
And they can't do it directly. So they had to trick us. They had to build this whole fake system so that we would voluntarily give our consent because they have to have it. And their stories fall apart so fast when you start looking into it. And that's what my ley line research led me to, was, seeing what was there originally and then seeing the stories that were there, and, how it looks like the Earth's grid system was taken over by the colonizers. You call them controllers, colonizers, whatever you want. Same thing. But they know about the Earth's grid system. We don't. And, there's people that it's so far out there that they're like, oh, well, that's just, a bunch of BS. It's not. Ley lines are very important. And I've encountered a number of people like myself that seem to have a connection to them because there seems to be a consciousness there that wants to come back. The information is there to tap into. You just need to know that it's there and that it's significant. And so with these long distance alignment, cities and places lining up all over the earth is what got me to looking at, each of these places. And that was where this information came out, and why I have anything at all to say to anybody about what the evidence shows happened here. And that's it. I mean, I never had anything to write about. I never saw myself doing anything like this. My degree's in social work. I worked in geriatric social work up until about 2002. I think that was the last time I worked as a social worker, activities director. And then I've held other positions since then because I've got a lot of good administrative organizational kinds of skills. I'm good at organizing information, which is something I'm able to use doing this work. And I've always been a good writer, but like I said, I never had anything to write about. And the information that this is based on just kept coming to me through these life experiences. Doesn't matter. I can pick a life experience. It's like synchronicities. It's like being in the right place at the right time, or, books that I read, Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock. As I was starting to, I like to say awaken or wake up.
It's always kind of fun when you can connect all your lifetime dots in hindsight. Yeah. It's a blast. Well, I can't wait to see your slides here.
Not really a slideshow, but I got a lot of stuff pulled up here.
Awesome.
So my journey starts here. This is what my original research is based on. But I knew about this shape because I had lived in Fairbanks, Alaska from 1994 to 1999 with my husband. He was starting to get sick I found out many, many years later, he had been exposed to Agent Orange in Vietnam. So his catastrophic health problems were connected to Agent Orange exposure in the 60s. And basically all of his organ systems shut down because of, full body ischemia is basically what happened. But at the time, we didn't know what was going on. So I moved, I'll cut out a lot of the story, but we had lived in Fairbanks, and then I moved back there in 2006. And it was starting in 2006, it's like I started getting the information coming into me directly that contributed to the work that I'm doing now. And I had a bad period of time in between, and I had to learn a lot of different things about myself during that time and decide what I wanted. And I ended up moving back to Alaska and met up with some friends that I had had there previously. They were into shamanic kinds of things. And one of my friends was familiar with Drunvalo Melchizedek's work on sacred geometry. And so that was my introduction there. It's like I got with friends right away that introduced me to information that led to all the work that I'm doing now. And so I learned about sacred geometry, which is basically the flower of life. All of the Platonic solids, the geometric shapes are found in the flower of life. I didn't pull that up. Let me do that real quick. And so the workshop taught me about this sacred geometry, and it's basically the creation shape of the universe, right down to our, when an egg is fertilized, it breaks into these shapes in different stages. So it's very important. That's also been removed. I do think it's very important. I have heard from other people that there's aspersions cast on this. I'm just going to put it out there as how I learned about it, which was
There's always going to be that in this community. By the way,
yeah.
there's nothing, which is great because there's nothing kind of ironically sacred anymore. But Drunvalo, Michelle, Bear and I used to talk about him a lot. I know Bear knows his work quite well in the Merkaba. And that being sort of sacred technology we can access to enter other realms and such. And looking at that map, actually, it did look like there he goes. There he goes. Bear's got a book of some sort. It's hard to see right now.
It might be hard to visualize now because I'm on the small screen, but that's volume 1 and volume 2. And I actually kind of got to know some of these characters personally. So yeah, good stuff.
Yeah. So that was during that early gestation period. After I moved back to Fairbanks in 2006, I became familiar with Drunvalo, attended a Flower of Life workshop, read those 2 books. He was active at that time. I watched his videos. One of his videos, Birth of a New Humanity, he talked about this physical grid. And that was before I started doing my own research. And he said that the ancients had, like 80,000 or 82,000 sites around the world that were part of this grid system. So that planted a seed in my consciousness. But at that time, I didn't know who. So that's really interesting, but who did that? So that was part of my journey. In another video of his called The Maya of Eternal Time, he talked about the ancients and how they need us and we need them. And that was another thing that stuck with me. And also during this time, I was following the end of the Mayan calendar very closely. And so because of that, I was made aware of a lot of things that were going on. And, getting as much of this information about grids as I possibly could. John Michelle's New View Over Atlantis. I read that. John Major Jenkins did some really good work. These places that were lining up geometrically. Hugh Newman is another one. Dowsers were bringing in this information about ley lines and talking about them in megalithomania presentations, which I first learned about in 2011. I learned how to activate my Merkaba from Drunvalo in 2 different ways. His last one was Awakening the Illuminated Heart or something like that. So I was in one of the very first classes on how to do that. So there's a masculine way, which he'd been teaching for years, and then there was a feminine way. And I just happened to be in the right place in the right space and time to be there for that. And so I was well aware of that, and I was probably more prepared spiritually in 2012. I've forgotten a lot since then. So much has happened. But I became aware of that in our spiritual selves and our, the connection that we all have with all of creation through our light bodies. And, how this, the holographic nature of the universe and how that works. And so I got that spiritual understanding that does go into the work that I'm doing. I mean, for me, this isn't a hobby. This is something I came here to do. And that there were these beautiful light beings, and when all this has taken place, our energy is being harvested, and we don't know who we are. And so, there's this, and research just keeps going into deeper and deeper levels, but we are in that time of no more secrets, like you said. It's been long prophesied. We are waking up. They've lost control of the narrative that they had control of for so long. And
if you understand the Merkaba, it's sectioned with an equator in the middle, and goes in 2 different directions and different rotations. So we've been hypnotized into just focusing our energy on one half, and so allowing people to siphon our energy off rather than giving our energy back to where it came from in the first place every moment. So yeah, it's straight physics.
Yeah, and that's actually what the Star of David shape is, and that's how most people see that. And that, again, that identity. Let me share my screen again. So that identity was hijacked along with other things, and the small group of controllers took over that identity and said, "We're it. This is us. We're the chosen ones." Right? That's what we're taught. And my research is showing me that the tribes of Israel were worldwide. And so when you look at the Moors and the ancient ones, it gets really confusing, because I've come to the conclusion we're talking about all the same people. The Moors and the Israelites, and Islam is not what we're taught. Islam is like the same idea. If you look at mastery of self, I self-law am master. And when the hijack came in, organized religions were used to for power and control and division. I mean, we're called denominations, like money, fractions. They're taking everything out of wholeness. And so fast forward a bit to my living in Oklahoma City, and I had left Fairbanks in 2012. My brother had invited my mother to live with he and his family. They were in Shawnee, Oklahoma, which is east of Oklahoma City. And my mom's a handful. And so I realized it was probably more than they realized they were going to get. And so I decided to move to Oklahoma. And I lived there for 6 years. And that was the beginning of my understanding about the Moors and this ancient civilization. I met a Moorish American man at a Unity Spiritual Life Center there, and he was very, very quiet. So he didn't tell me, but he showed me, as the beautiful person that he is, named Osiris, Pharaoh Osiris, who the Moors are. Psychic, just love-filled. It's not that there aren't issues. There's a lot of issues to overcome with how this is played out with the division between people because of skin color and race and religion. Like you said at the beginning, Bar, it wasn't like that. And, you know, the controllers use that divide and conquer tactic very successfully, unfortunately, all the time to this very day. And so part of our journey on this plane is to move into higher consciousness, which is love. And we have some things to overcome. So so my Moorish friend, he and two other ladies from Unity and I would travel. And so this is when I was first starting to see this. And I noticed megalithic stones lying on the street, you know, on the sidewalk. And I saw earthworks all around me. And we went to places like Dallas on our way to Rockwall, because I learned about Rockwall, Texas, and I wanted to go see it. And on the way, I stopped at Dealey Plaza, and it's like a stage. It was really claustrophobic. It's like, how could all that stuff happen when the buildings are like right next to each other? And, you know, why is a guy going to go to the top of the depository and shoot the president of the United States here? It was just so. What that prompted me to do when I got home was I looked up the JFK assassination and the Freemasons. And that led me into information and knowledge that it's not benevolent. I'm talking at the top level. The beings that infiltrated here went in through the Masonic lodges, and they usurped the identity of the Masons. So the original Moorish Masons had 360 degrees of initiation. The Western Freemasons were at 33 degrees. So we know water freezes at 32 degrees. So they don't have those higher levels of initiation. But what they do seem to have is the knowledge, firstly, of the grid system, but also of occulting and the use of spellcasting and things like that, which they I find that the Earth's original grid system was reverse engineered, and they've maintained this control of our consciousness by manipulating the grid. So like the things that happen in Dallas, and this would be a major line on the grid system, the prana tube, if you will, of the star tetrahedron or Merkaba. And so I started learning about things like that, and I started learning about the Moors from my friend. And the way that I would learn about it is I would make a mistake. I would say something, and he would, send me these Moorish teachers. For example, that's just one way. He and my friends Anne and Polly would go to different places, like my house, my apartment, or Polly's apartment, or whatever, and watch videos like things on the secret space program, and some of these awakening kinds of videos. And we were at my place one time, and Osiris was wearing a t-shirt, and my friend Anne said, "Osiris, why are you wearing an Illuminati t-shirt?" Because it was a picture of the what we thought was the seal of the United States, with the pyramid and the eye on top. That was right before we were done. So he left, and the next thing I know, I'm getting these really hot emails. And that is actually the Great Seal of the Moors. That was also usurped by the controllers. And so I'm learning these things viscerally and have absolutely no reason to question their story. I mean, they've been erased from history. They and genocided. I mean, there's so many layers to this story about what's happened here that it blows the mind. Because I think a cataclysm buried the giants. I've come to that, and they blew up the giant trees that were part of this energy grid system. And those conclusions have come after years of doing this, but that's all part of the story. It's not what we've been taught in school. The American educational system, and probably others in other countries, was heavily influenced by the Rockefeller Foundation and the Carnegie Foundation, major players in this reset. So they gave us the information they wanted us to have, and taught us basic skills, reading, writing, and arithmetic, so we would become obedient workers. And if you went beyond being working in a factory, in a mill, and went into some professional line, you got a little bit more information, but they weren't looking for free thinkers or critical thinkers, which is another part of the problem, is how we've been educated. The fill in the blank and the multiple choice, true or false. You think differently, you get hammered by your peers and your teacher. And so that's how we've been educated. And it's all been to support the status quo and the let's say 1%, to keep it simple, who are making money hand over fist and oppressing us at the same time, giving us crumbs so we would think we had it good, but actually not. Not have our birthright of abundance and sovereignty and freedom and things like that. So this is a pretty complicated situation here, but again, that's what we've been up against. And when one of my travel friends, Anne, gave me this flat map that I put next to my dining room table. I still have the map. It's pretty sad shape, but this is where it started. And by that time, I'd watched enough of the megalithomania broadcasts and other things where I knew that there were these long distance alignments and that they were precise, sacred sites lining up around the world. That information was coming out. But this is something that I found because I noticed cities in North America lining up in lines. And so I found this one. Actually, I found these lines first, the really faint ones in here. And then I found this one from Edmonton to Ottawa, and then this from Ottawa across the country down to about here. I took that back up, and I thought, I wonder if I can find another one. And so I found this with the apex in Merida, Mexico. And then I started by extending the lines out here, and I took it as far as I could. And I had to switch to a globe. It's what I had available. I wanted to see what was on the other side. Could have spent a lot of money on a program and not figured out how to work it. So I just did it the old-fashioned way, and I extended the lines around the world. I wrote down cities and places that lined up in lines and circles. And it's yielded a lot of information, and everything is a projection. So the data points, like the coordinates, would be the same. And so, I do get pushback on occasion from people who question it because of things like that, but it's like the information is still good. I don't know how it all works, but I do know that following these cities and places in alignment it's like a gold mine. And so,
Michelle, are you literally, just so we can better understand, you're finding specific points of interest, cities that have, Tartarian-like or whatever, this type of, old world architecture and stuff, and then you're literally taking a straight line, like a ruler, and you're just following the line and see what else it meets up with?
So so what I did was, again, I think this whole civilization was built out along sacred geometric lines.
Mhm.
So circles and lines. So I did both.
Yeah.
And I'll show you some examples here in just a moment. And it also, everything's lined up with what's going on up there. So Earth is like a mirror of heaven. And also, I mean, whether it's solstices and equinoxes, it's eclipses, eclipse paths, cities along that. I mean, the most recent one. This is just one example, and I'll show you. I think my belief at the time I found it was that this was the terminus of the Earth's grid. And I still believe that. And at the time, I thought this was going to unlock other people's information. But that's as far as my thought went, because I had no concept of where this was going to go. That was just my intuitive feeling at the time. And I never planned on doing anything like this. It was just a recognition starting in the time from 2016 to 2018, where it's like, how can I show people what I'm seeing? And things just unfolded synchronistically to allow that to happen. And I moved to Sedona in 2017. And that was when it really took off for me. In terms of information and synchronicities and meeting people that helped me get the tools I needed to start doing what I'm doing. And yeah, so it's just been an incredible journey that way. So just to give you an example, before at the very, very beginning of, let me add one more thing to my previous story because it's really important. Sorry. So Oklahoma was part of the heart of the ancient Ouachita Empire. Arkansas and Louisiana were like the core of it, even though there were, was that whole section of what is now the United States. And Monroe was the imperial capital of the Ouachita Empire, and that's where the empress, the imperial seat was, and they were matriarchal. Women are life givers, all about natural law. The roles were clear, but women very much respected in that tradition. And this was, I believe this was worldwide. Again, the narrative has been so fragmented, it's really hard to hear kings, emperors, all that kind of stuff. But my sense is the original civilization was matriarchal in nature and in structure. So,
well, it also follows biological law. You have the external wage here, the yang, that sole role is to protect the yin core that gives life, and prior civilizations well understood that and modeled their entire cultures and societies and architecture and everything around that. It makes pretty perfect sense. And also pretty perfect sense why we do the opposite now, since we're all participating in a death cult.
the ones that I know of for sure are the Ouachita, the Tuaregs of North Africa, Moors in Sri Lanka. Again, I think there's many, many, many others, but I can identify those clearly as the matriarchal, matrilineal. Queen Khalifa in California. So again, things were much different than what we've been told. So as I was starting to write down the places and cities in alignment, there were certain things that I had started to identify as what to look for. This was like the very first grid sheet I ever did in 2016. And most of what I'm going to share here was in 2016. I did a few after that, and now my eyes are so strained that it would be really hard for me to keep doing this kind of thing, but there's way more to find. So indicators of Moor slash MUUR slash Hebrew Israelite global presence and construction in the global grid. Cities and places worldwide are aligned on continuous geometric lines with the same characteristics. Hot springs, all kinds of springs, waterfalls, small to large, salt lakes, copper mines, mountain ranges, where you see pyramidal and or mountains of other unusual shapes, geometric shapes like earthworks, mounds, infrastructure that are covered up everywhere, snaky S-shaped rivers, canals, arched bridges, lighthouses, onion domes around the world, presence in national, state, or local parks, universities, schools, cathedrals, churches, castles, and palaces around the world, civic buildings, i.e. domed Capitol buildings, all manner of older community buildings still in use to this day, aqueducts, anything or place with large stone blocks in general, ruins, canyons, bluffs, mesas, escarpments, hoodoos, chimney rocks, natural anything, arches, bridges, steps, windows. And then you see artificially shaped coastlines, harbors, and islands everywhere. And I was seeing at least 4 distinct periods of infrastructure and architecture, the same worldwide: ancient, what would be considered medieval, what would be considered Renaissance, and what would be considered modern and is still in use. You know, so this civilization existed for a very long time, and loosely follows those historic eras that we're taught as our own. But it was theirs. So this civilization, in my personal opinion, existed until relatively recently, and we live and work on top of it. Or what could be restored? I think a lot of it's either destroyed, sunken, swampy areas, deserts, dunes. It's what you would call the mud flood, or some kind of cataclysmic event, which I believe was a series of deliberately caused attacks on the Earth's grid system, is where I'm landing with that. Yeah, that's based on a ton of research. And that the sinking of Atlantis happened relatively recently and not a long time ago, like we're told.
And that
So,
does make sense, using the Earth's grid system, the ley lines, when you know, considering how many there are and how it just overlaps everything as a network channel for some sort of disturbance to create a massive mud flood type event. That makes a lot of sense, because that was always sort of the big question, because there's so much evidence that I've seen, even just in towns around here, of a mud flood, where you see, you know, classic Freemason buildings where the windows are like half buried. You're like, why are there basements that are like half buried in from these old buildings and things? But it was always like, what did this? How could that be achieved? And there's all sorts of theories, but I love that. That seems to be the one that makes the most sense to me, to be honest.
so I've spent a lot of time studying this. Like I said, I wouldn't put any of these ideas out there if I didn't believe it or have the information to back it up. So it's there, but like estuaries and swamps and marshlands and wetlands, and they're called natural. Um, they're natural as far as we're concerned. You go there, you see the wildlife, you take a nice walk through the rushes, the marshes, but that's ruined land. And coastal areas around the world share these characteristics. And that comes to mind when I'm looking at Portland and I'm seeing a star fort point right next to the Bybee urban wetlands, which are right next to a rail yard. And there's a homeless shelter on top of the star fort point, which gets into the energy harvesting. there's so much more going on with everything along those lines. And I'm coming into more and more awareness about that. You know, we power the grid now, the matrix. And so there's so many reasons just, again, to get this information out and get people thinking differently. And I wish it wasn't so. I really wish I had a better, happier story to tell. But again, all you have to kind of do is see where we're at right now and wonder how do we get here? How did we get here with the inversions and the perversions and the suppression and the lies and, you know, the constant pushing and fear and war and all that kind of stuff, because that's not our nature in our original state. And so anyway, up here I had learned about the nodal points of the Earth's grid system, and there's 12 primary nodal points. Axum, Ethiopia, Borobudur in Indonesia, Delphi in Greece, let's see, Göbekli Tepe, Gobi Desert, the birthplace of Lumbini, Nepal, which is the birthplace of Buddha, in our historical narrative. Minas Gerais in Brazil, Mount Hakusan in Japan, Rapa Nui, which is Easter Island, Sedona, Sri Lanka, Sri Pada in Sri Lanka, which is also known as Adams Peak, and Uluru in Australia. I think that's a full list. But so there's 12 primary nodal points. And I marked those in yellow in the sheets that I'm going to show you here in just a moment. And then the blue is a hot or significant spot. And that's that was for me to highlight at the very beginning of this, that there was historical action taking place on these alignments, like civil wars and things like that. So I wrote down these cities and places that were lining up. And they were taking me places I had absolutely no reason to look at. And I'm finding all these civil wars, for example. This Isle Royale in Lake Superior has ancient copper deposits of like the purest form of copper in the world. And the alignment here crossed right over it. That's why I have it marked here. Isle Royale copper mines. For example. And this is the same alignment going in a different direction. So I started at Cape Farewell, which is at the tip of Greenland. I tracked it in the other direction. And, you know, again, looking for information here, identifying it, you know, the volcanoes. It went over the Kiribati Islands and Howland Island, where Amelia Earhart disappeared. So you've got, you know, how did that happen? You know, right on the alignment kind of thing. You know, these places like Panama, Nicaragua, Honduras, you know, we've got the Mexico and the drug wars and cartels, all of this war kind of stuff going on here. You know, and I absolutely believe they were intentionally causing all of this pain and suffering on the grid system for a reason. And then how I found the Silk Road. That's what I did a series based on this, and I'll share that in just a moment, starting in Montreal and following these cities and places in alignment. And I did that for quite a few of the alignments that I found. You know, taken me everywhere. And just go through some of these things. So even Grenada is on the alignment where the US invaded in 1984. And the only reason I'm eligible to be a member of the American Legion was that there was that conflict. And you can see pictures of, college students in tank tops and shorts in Grenada with, a soldier pointing a gun at them. Save that little island from whatever communism or whatnot. Some crazy reason. So again, I'm plotting these places out, and I'm finding nuclear testing on the alignments. This one alignment had Novaya Zemlya in Russia, which is a little boomerang-shaped island off the northern coast of Russia, where there was nuclear testing, going through an area with huge sinkholes. And then I found another nuclear test site in China at Lop Nor. The place where the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami hit Banda Aceh and destroyed it. In places I never heard of, the Siberut Mentawat Islands, found Christmas Island in Australia, which is off the coast of Australia. They did a lot of mining of phosphates there, and there are a lot of places that were just stripped because they were mining for phosphates.
I believe FPV Angel has used some overlays on the map of Earth in order to pinpoint certain mineral deposits in predictable places.
Yeah, and I'm gonna talk about that because when I did the these two, so the Cape Farewell going in different directions. Yeah, so it's these two. What I did for that was I pull this up, but I did a series called Bonanza, the correlation of mines and minerals to the Earth's grid system. Part 1, Cape Farewell, Greenland to San Francisco, California. Part 2, Hawaii's Big Island to Merida, Mexico. That was going in one direction. And then the other one was Cape Farewell to Isle Royale, Michigan, and Sudbury, Ontario to the Maldives. And that was going in the other direction. I found a mine or a mineral occurrence of some kind on every data point that I looked at. Every data point on this list had something. And even the Maldives has coral mining. Here, even the Maldives has coral mining. But there was some mines, extensive mining along the way, or like in Hawaii, there's the black sand beach, which is peridot or olivine, and the black sand beach. I found that. So even if there wasn't a mine, there was something. So that the black sand beach is made of basalt. I have to look at this real quick. Made of basalt. And my theory about that is that, you have to have things in certain places, like for a car, for it to run. And so I think there were these mineral occurrences, and everything was laid out in a particular place on the grid system for a particular function, and that connected with the energy grid system, and that same idea can be applied to all of the infrastructure, all of the buildings, the Antiquitech, the rail lines seem to be connected to the giant trees, and it was all working together. That there was a relationship between the ancient builders and these systems like the giant trees, because in some places you can see that star forts are built on top of them, or there's some kind of energy exchange going on between what looks like a giant tree stump and some kind of infrastructure. Also, it gets a lot deeper when you look at the idea of a cataclysm. All of the islands that were claimed by the colonial powers in the late 1700s, early 1800s primarily. So there was a big age of exploration between, let's say, 1799, Alexander von Humboldt, through like the Beagle, exploring the Galapagos Islands in Australia, and other expeditions. So the Americans had an expedition going out, the French had an expedition going out, and they were claiming all these lands and islands. And I believe they were exploring a post-cataclysmic world, and that a lot of these islands were actually giant tree stumps. Which when you talked, Bar, about the Ouachita talking about one landmass,
Right.
I think that's what we're talking about. I think there was one landmass. Gondwana land was what it was like before, and that the oceans and the seas and the bays and the sounds, I think those are new. And I've collected a lot of data about sunken land, or like rail going through deserts, or rail like in the middle of a lake in Siberia, Lake Berlinskoye. There's a railroad going right through the middle of it, and it's a pink lake. It it's like it's like, I don't think they built it that
Oh
way.
yeah.
One of a lot of examples. Swamplands with
What is their explanation, Michelle, for that? Global warming?
probably, who knows? Um,
The
COVID.
idea with the rail lines being there, obviously they probably weren't using coal trains going across those rails.
I would guess not. I think we're talking electricity, electromagnetism, those kinds of things, because that infrastructure was clearly in place, and they've taken out just about all of it. There was rail infrastructure everywhere. So we're talking railroads and streetcars, subways. And again, the stories and the narrative just do not match. And then if you're going to put all that time and energy into building those systems, why take them out? We have regressed with our infrastructure.
Yeah, I
Again, it's
mean
just asking a question.
they say in Los Angeles, because of the big automobile industry and the tire industry, they wanted to take out the rail lines so they can get everyone in cars. But yeah, now it's funny because now they're trying to put them all back, and they
Yeah.
suck. I can't tell you, the few times I've tried to take public transportation in Los Angeles was just a nightmare. Yeah, they always create some sort of story, right, around it and why it is what it is. It doesn't hold as much water. That kind of makes sense, that one. But I remember walking around in Baltimore when my wife and I lived in Baltimore for a stretch. She was working at Johns Hopkins, and they had all those rail lines everywhere that were gone. You could still see them, but they had a really cool rail system there back in the day.
Yeah.
That it's crazy that they got rid of that.
And that just gets into the story of how we got here and what the controller's actual goals are. And so my belief at this point in time is they destroyed the original grid system, the free energy, worldwide, harmonious system, and they had to find replacement sources of fuel and transportation as quickly as they possibly could. And so I really focused on Appalachia, also Appalachia, I grew up calling it Appalachia, so that's what I say, but I've been corrected. It's Appalachia. There's so much hidden history in that area, and that's where this whole new system really began in Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And Pennsylvania was where legislation was passed, let's say 1765, to start bringing the canals online. Of course, they tell us building them. So they started with the canals, and then I'll come back to this in just a second. So they started with the canals. They got the canals up and running so they could transport the anthracite coal of eastern Pennsylvania from about Scranton to Harrisburg are the fields. It kind of goes in a diagonal direction. And so their first goal was the anthracite coal, getting the canals up, getting the railroads up after that, opening the West up, getting things moving into the Northwest Territory, which was like Ohio and up around the Great Lakes. They started mining the coal, the iron ore in West Virginia, Pennsylvania. They had to have the railroad up and running for that. Lumber industry, chopping down all the trees they could find. They're harvesting all of these resources. They're developing gasoline. So oil was discovered in Titusville, Pennsylvania in 1859, and oil refining process, I believe, had been developed in 1854 by a man named Samuel Kier, K-I-E-R, in Pittsburgh. It started out as kerosene, and then I guess they got their refining process. And then Standard Oil was founded in 1870 by John Rockefeller and Henry Flagler. And that was around the same area where all that was going on, was where an 8-foot tall giant skeleton was found in West Hickory, Pennsylvania. When they were so that if you look up, the tallest giants, that's the tallest one in North America, was the one that was found in West Hickory. And then they find all these giant bones. So the story is they're in mounds, but they're digging up giant bones everywhere in the 1800s, mid to late 1800s. And they talked about it in newspaper articles and so forth. At that time, they were on display at public buildings or stores, and that was all made to go away, likely through like the Smithsonian and other outfits in place as gatekeepers. The American Antiquarian Association was one, another one. The National Geographic Society was another one. Again, gatekeepers, narrative shapers, that kind of thing. And then we're not supposed to know about the giants. So now it's fake news. You see anything about giants, it's like hoax. But I think they're right underneath us. I think whatever destroyed the civilization destroyed the giants, and we were much bigger. And that's where you get the architecture with really tall doors and high ceilings. And why would people our size be building buildings this large? And I just think the resetters came in and made it usable and wrote the story and attributed the architect or the architectural firm or the construction firm as to how this building came into existence. And it makes no sense, because we're seeing, Greco-Roman style architecture come into existence in the United States where there wasn't supposed to be anything, starting in the early 1800s. Say monumental architecture being built around the time of the Civil War or the Great Depression. It makes no sense. But that's not what we're told.
A lot of Christian pastors are really culpable in spreading ignorance, in that they equate these past peoples with evil fallen angels and all sorts of things. Yeah, and it's tough because you have a lot of those groups that believe that they are part of the patriot movement, but at the same time more duped through institutionalized religion than a lot of folks out there. So who are the people that destroyed the grid? Any speculation how that was done and what was the force behind all this?
Well, certainly fallen angels could top that list easily. I have
Okay.
no problem with that. And
Uh-huh.
if you look at Paradise Lost, you just even go into Wikipedia and just see the basic summary. Um, you know, Lucifer and his buddies are kicked out of heaven and meet and vow to basically ruin God's newest, most favored creation, which was humankind. And that's exactly what's happened. And that book was published around 1666, 1667. And Moloch was mentioned by name. And Moloch, if you're at least into some kind of alternative anything, we hear about today. Moloch's name has not gone away. Lucifer's name has not gone away. And we see all the disclosure and the Olympics opening and closing ceremonies within the last couple of weeks or days. They're out there. They are telling us what's going on with that. But I believe they're not the only ones.
Yeah, what's out there is definitely telling us what they believe in, and then somewhere might lie some truth. I don't know. So would you equate these past races of giants with that
I don't.
fallen force, we'll say?
I don't.
Okay.
I personally don't, but a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I see this civilization just prior that was beautiful and creative. Humanity at its highest functioning, a co-creative force. And that I don't know where to put the Nephilim in there. We've been told so many different stories. I do not see this civilization as evil. I see it as amazing. And
the
that's our
Washita people, the Washita people, I used to listen to them. They talk about them as their ancestors and the tall people and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think we've all been engineered, human engineering and social engineering, to get us into the sizes that we are now. And, the whole, at odds, skin color, race, religion, belief, be life.
Yeah, I definitely go along with that. There's too much evidence, if you're a student of biological sciences and, my vocation as a physician, you see ample evidence of that all the time and trace it as a source of maladies that are epidemic amongst our population. Just, we've definitely been tampered with. And we're still being tampered with, of course.
Yeah, totally. And then you get into the whole story of the repopulation and the orphan trains, and
right, yeah.
And they're bringing in at the same time they're ramping up their new world order.
Did the orphans come from the Cabbage Patch?
I don't know about that, but they were definitely farming out these children. And again, when you're aware of that part of the story of the dark underbelly of what's been going on in this world, which I don't really like to talk about, but it's there, it has to be dealt with, about what's been, children are what's targeted by this system. They want that pure source energy. And so
and there are insane asylums everywhere too, Michelle.
Right. Absolutely.
I've told stories about a good number of clients I had in the past, who came in, of course, with physical ailments, quite often serious. And to get to the bottom of it so they could heal their bodies, we had ways to uncover these memories that they couldn't even recall. And most often it would lead us to these fragmented parts of their past where they were purposely abused in order to, create these indoctrinations, and that would then become the basis of their illness. And when that was cleared, their physical bodies would actually heal.
And the insane asylums were also on the grid as well,
Yeah.
as you know, as well as so-called Civil War battles, which I don't think was what we're taught. I think if anything, they were genociding more indigenous people, or some kind of explanation having to do with the giants, and blowing up the bridges and trains and all that other stuff. So there was something else going on, destroying star forts. They say, well, we built this for the Civil War. It's like, no, they wanted a reason to destroy it, explanation for its destruction. So yeah, there's just a lot of stuff. And I mean, we were a mess in the 1900s, and if we wonder why not everybody's waking up, or some may never wake up. It's because this has been going on. Our psychological abuse and torment and cruelty. These beings are cruel, and I think we're probably talking about other, either interdimensional beings, archons, or dare I say reptilian, or other beings that don't have that God spark, that need our suffering for their survival. They get it synthetically. And so I'm quite sure they're behind this as well. My area of expertise is what I talk about, and I don't go there, generally speaking, because it's not something that is mainstream. But certainly, alternatively, there are people that do have an awareness of that. And again, there's so much that's been left out. Since my premise did not start with flat Earth, I do accept it. And then I hear things about outer space and all that other stuff, and water, and water beneath us, water above us, the firmament. I'm cool with that. There's so much we don't know, and I'm just giving those examples as that's not my area of expertise. Yep. But we have been kept in the dark for a reason. We don't know who we are. We don't know where we came from. We don't know the shape of the earth. We don't know any of this, and they don't want us to know it. And so there's a lot of information to fill that vacuum, and a lot of different opinions and schools of thought. And I have seen where things come up on my social media where I see like the rings of this plane. And so the idea that extraterrestrials don't necessarily come from outer space, there's like, that's not an area of expertise of mine either, but I've seen visuals of that.
I mean, I don't know the answer. The words tell you the truth: terrestrial, extraterrestrial, from other parts of the territory, from the terrestrial land, and potentially underground, from inner Earth, which is
and
there's
deep underground military.
Yeah, I was just going to say there's so many Native American traditions and African and all sorts of indigenous traditions about people coming from inside the earth. And so maybe that's, there's a lot of grand tradition about how we've repopulated after the resets, is those that come from inside the earth are the masters that reteach us. And there's a lot of cool traditions too around sailors, Nordic traditions and stuff. Robert Sepper talks about this in multiple videos about how there's accounts of sailors going through these, vortexes in the ocean or through caverns, and they end up in this sort of, advanced civilization inside the earth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Those stories are in like science fiction. It's Jules Verne.
Yeah.
There's a book called Vril, The Power of the Coming Race.
I have it.
Okay. So that's telling you that too.
That's what's his name? Lytton.
Yep. Bulwer Lytton.
Yeah, that's the one I shared. It's a fun read. Is that the one where it's the miners and they fall down a hole and they go to this like ancient civilization? Yeah. And that's a really fun one, you guys. I think I have that on the Alfa Vedic book list. And that guy's kind of like that author is like sort of a Rosicrucian occulted author for sure.
And Vril
And
is like, energy, and the ancients knew how to work with it. And so with this inversion and perversion and suppression, they've claimed Vril as theirs and use it in an opposite way.
Yeah,
Um,
Edward
you know,
Bulwer Lytton. He also wrote Zanoni, which is one of my a really fun read. We've talked about on the podcast before, but um, yeah, the extraterrestrial. It makes a lot of sense when you look at we're talking about like the Earth is a projection of the sky and back and forth. Well, what about the moon, right? The plasma projection of the lunar body. And there's been a lot of cool research showing that it actually, if it is a reflection of this plane, then it shows the other lands.
right. And so, again, we've been miseducated, misinformed, kept indirect, kept ignorant, propagandized, lied to every day. Um, and whatever the shape of this place, we're the target, and children especially, but all of humanity is what they're after, because they seemingly want to replace the God that's the creator of the universe, source, with their guy. And so, um, like I said earlier, I mean, that's the bottom line of what we're up against. And I see the Earth as like a grand central station of the universe, and that the healing of the frequencies, solfeggio frequencies that were generated by the organs, and sent out through the solfeggio frequency shaped cathedral rose windows of cathedrals, the Antiquitech that was there, the bell towers were so tall because they were sending those frequencies out to the universe. I see the kingdom of God here. The physical kingdom of God was here, and that I'm totally comfortable with the idea of the millennial reign and the short season, because that's kind of what I'm seeing. 1666, the plague in London, the fire in London, the publication of Paradise Lost, a man named John Comenius, who was a Czech father of education. Somebody sent me something about him, and I'd never heard of him before. He was a player in this. He published a book called the Via Lucis and the College of Light, and talked about this whole new system that he wanted to bring in educationally, which, not for the good. You see LUC, it's not, it's a clue. The Via Lucis, the Lucis Trust, things like that coming up. The Anna Lucis of the Masons. And that plays into something else that was one of my original findings, if you will. So I was mulling this whole idea of this timeline, and I was looking at 1492, which is the year of the fall of the Moors in Granada, and 1942, which was midway through World War II, and the Philadelphia experiment, I think likely now occurred on August 12th of 1943. But when I first looked at it, it was 1942. It was July 22nd. So somewhere in there, if it was the August 12th of 1943, that would have put it in Lionsgate, where you have the infinity symbol, the 8-8. And I think that's where the Philadelphia experiment was, where the timeline was hijacked. And that I think the Philadelphia experiment was made to go back in time and created a rip in the fabric of space-time that brought in the Rothschild and the Weishaupts and the line that became the British royal family, the Windsors. from the House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. I think they all came in within a few years of what was called the Great Frost of Ireland, which is what I think was caused by the Philadelphia experiment. And that was an intuitive and synchronistic finding. And I did a lot of research around that timeline. I do think there's something to it. And again, I wouldn't put it out there with my name on it if I didn't, but I found a lot of anomalous information when I started looking at that period of time. So there's 400. Let me just
I
finish
was
up
just
one
going
thing.
to say oh, sorry, go ahead, please.
So I just want to say, so there's 450 years between 1492 and 1942. At 225 years on either side, 1717 is the midpoint year. And 1717 was the year of the founding of the Premier Grand Lodge of England. And it was also the year that those Masons adopted the Anna Lucis in 1717. A lot of stuff happened around that time that was very interesting. So the heir to the House of Stuart, James Francis Edward Stuart, was forced into exile. He was not allowed to claim the throne, and the House of Hanover came in starting in 1714, but still around that time. And then on 1717, water music by Handel premiered for King George I on the River Thames. July 17th of 1917 was the year that the name of the British Royal House was changed from House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to Windsor. So there's something going on with the 717 and the 17, which was an interesting anomaly. And there were other things that I found just looking at those years. And I do believe the timeline has been occulted, and they've used numerology and things like that with the occulting. So I'm sorry, go ahead with your question.
Oh, it wasn't a question. It was just an anecdote. In volume 2 of the Flower of Life, they bring up the Philadelphia experiment. Now, I read this a long time ago, but they talked about 2 twins that were transported. Do you remember that? On the boat that was... Anyway, interesting because they were talking about whoever wrote this little story here, that they were introduced to the twins from that time period that were on the boat that was transported by football coach Pete Carroll. And my mouth kind of dropped open because he's an old buddy of mine. I used to play football with him, and he's prominent in the NFL now, but ever since then, I've wanted to look him up and say, Pete, did you actually meet these twins from the past time? But anyway, it's just a crazy connection because I came across that when I was reading The Flower of Life, Volume 2 here.
And I actually think that was probably the first time I had heard about the Philadelphia experiment, I'm going to guess.
Uh-huh.
This was long before I started doing my own research and, what I just talked about. But, I don't think it's crazy. I think there's something there. And within the last year or two, I found physical evidence to support that whole idea.
Well, I think
Well,
the whole
someday
secret
I'm going to
space.
ask Pete personally about that.
Yes, please do, Bear. We've been wanting to do that for years now.
I know.
Yeah, I think the whole secret space program, NASA, all of the sort of UFO, underground base, all that stuff is that is the remnants of it's the control system, right? Trying to somehow figure out how to reuse all this, the antiquitech, the ancient tech, right? That from the previous civilization. So they've had to occult it. But that's really where everything's coming from. And I think that's where they say, like, we get plastic, we get the microchip, we get all these things from, fallen craft. But really, I think it's just remedial sort of caveman versions of what was already here from the previous civilization that they wiped out, or that there's the other idea too, that the civilization fell from within. I mean, what's your grand thesis, by the way, Michelle, on the reset? How long ago was it? Um, and what was the driving factor? And is this something that repeats over and over again? Have you thought of that?
I don't see it as something that happens cyclically.
Mhm.
My grand thesis is that it was deliberately caused. I think the Philadelphia experiment was one of them. I think Aleister Crowley performed an act of ceremonial black magic at the Menant Hole in Cornwall, which is a megalith with a hole in it. Peter Moon mentioned that in his book, Synchronicity and the Seventh Seal. And Peter was a guide on my journey before I started doing all of this work, and where I learned a lot more about Crowley. I wasn't familiar with him other than when I was a teenager. I read a book called The Book of Lists, and Crowley's name was mentioned several times. And prior to Peter's work, that was the only knowledge I had of the name. And Peter was one of the few people that talked about the Moors, and that's how I found him when I was looking for information. He and Richard Smith. I think I actually found Peter through Richard Smith's European Confessions of a Moorish Legacy. And that was when I was starting to wake up to this, the Washita, and this whole missing stream of information about the Moors when I was living in Oklahoma City. So that would have been around probably 2014, 2015, that I encountered both Richard's work and Peter's work. And so Peter talked a lot about Aleister Crowley, and he studies time travel. He talked about the Philadelphia experiment. I did not read all of his books. I read several of them. And I was seeking information primarily on the Moors, but this Crowley guy kept coming up. And Peter's history, he actually learned how to remote view and whatnot from the original L. Ron Hubbard Sea Org. And it was interesting because he was a young man when he was learning that information after his parents had, I want to say his parents were killed. They were killed in a car wreck. I just don't remember if it was before or after he was in the Sea Org, but I think he was in the Sea Org after they were killed. And he makes it clear that L. Ron Hubbard was not the squeaky clean guy, because he was involved with Crowley and Jack Parsons and the whole the Babylon working, as he talked about that, and bringing in this whole new age. And I think this is where the TG stuff comes from. The transgender stuff we're experiencing now is this whole Crowley element. And so we're dealing, I think, with a huge demonic influence here. However they manifest, I think, this whole system is just not human, wanting human energy. But anyway, I learned a lot of stuff from Peter's work, and he did look at Montauk and the Montauk Project and the work with Preston Nichols.
The monster of Montauk, and there was Al Bielek, who was the supposed whistleblower that was involved with that. That I was fascinated by that. I got so into that, like I tried to go there because my mom's family's from back upstate New York, and visit there and then look for the underground. There's supposedly, like, there was some researchers that went and found some of the entrances to the old base, and there was black helicopters coming up, and I was going to go do all that. I love the Montauk story, really trippy stuff. All of that is just, it's fun. They're fun rabbit holes to go down. But in the end, I really like what you're doing, Michelle, here, because this is something we can more easily see, right? With the way you're connecting the lines between the cities, and also, like what we stress, everybody should just go into their town. If you go into your town and go look at the old Masonic buildings and the civic buildings and stuff, and start to see all these parallels within the architecture there. It's there, right, for everyone to go look at.
Yep. Here's real interesting. Sorry, just take a second, Michelle. Page 306 of Volume 2, The Flower of Life. And I'll just kind of read and do a little paraphrasing. This is Melchizedek talking about an episode he was involved with right after he was giving a seminar somewhere or a workshop. I had already connected with one of the original members of the Philadelphia experiment, and this engineer couldn't believe that I actually knew and understood what they had been doing. He was so excited about it that he had given us a few pieces of the original equipment and showed us exactly how it was done. It was all based on the star tetrahedron. So now someone was inviting me to meet a survivor. And the paragraph before that, he's talking about Pete Carroll. The night or the next morning, a man named Peter Carroll called me. He was then a coach of the New York Jets. He said that he had gotten my name from someone who had heard that I was talking about the Philadelphia experiment. He wanted to know if I wanted to meet one of the survivors of this experiment. Then he says, I went to Peter's house and I met two people, Duncan Cameron, who was one of the people who allegedly survived the Philadelphia experiment, and Preston Nichols, who has since written a book about this experiment. They had used Duncan and his human spine in 1943 to do this experiment, putting a synthetic Merkaba field around him. Later, when the experiment was tried again in 1983, it was called the Montauk experiment, of which Preston claims to be one of the original engineers, and it goes on. So quite an interesting story. And again, I'm gonna actually aggressively track down Peter and actually get to the bottom of this now, see if I can get a firsthand account. But interesting, a synthetic Merkaba around the guy's spine in order to create the Montauk experiment.
Yeah, I mean, I think the information's important. You know, I don't think it's a hoax. I think it really happened. And I think there's a lot to it. And I actually think that's how they did this. And that's how we got here to where we are today. That the Philadelphia experiment created some kind of, so there is an actual alignment from Cornwall to close to the Philadelphia Navy Yard, and it goes right through Montauk. It goes through Cape Cod, where there's a pine barrens. It goes through central Long Island, where there's pine barrens, and then the New Jersey pine barrens. And then there's the moors in the UK. They're called the moors. It's the same kind of landscape. And, you know, it's just, you know, again, it's ruined land, and you've got abandoned rail lines all through the pine barrens, and you've got trains on those rail lines. So I kind of look at it like the day the earth stood still, this happened, and everything just stopped where it was. There's abandoned trains in the bayous of Louisiana. I was watching, one of my favorite programs is Pit Bulls and Parolees, and I on YouTube, Mariah had a short of this like outing in the bayou, and they went to this where this train was. So I think this happened instantaneously. I think there was a sound frequency component to part of this. There's so much damage to the Earth's grid that I feel like it was more than one event. I think the Philadelphia experiment caused some of the damage through frequency, that it caused a forced resonant frequency. When that happens, you know, so you have your frequency and then you put the forced resonance, it will cause wine glasses to break. It'll cause bridges to swing. I mean, it's a destructive force. And so I do think, you know, there's something about frequency and bells, the original bells and so forth, like I was talking about the organs. I think the system just went haywire when that happened. So I think that was one aspect, but I absolutely think there was probably some kind of nuclear attack on the grid system at different places, is my feeling, because it's just too much devastation. The desert areas, you know, whole continent sheared off into the ocean. And it's our normal, so we don't know that the
some sort of
lands.
plasma like weapon or something that could just like melt everything, and and then of course the sound vibration that you've seen, like there's experiments that have been done to cause mud flooding by using vibration, and so where it liquefies, it's liquefaction of sand and stuff like that.
I think it was a combination of all of those things. And
I only say that
and
because there's a whole thing, Michelle, about how nukes aren't real. I'm sure you followed that
I
thread line too.
yeah, I got it. Whatever they did, some kind of directed energy, like things that are causing
Yeah.
the fires these days or however many years ago. Um, this technology has been misapplied. You look at pictures of the San Francisco earthquake and fire and the Chicago fire, and I mean, it looks like a war zone. So I think these things
Lahaina,
have been going
Maui.
on for a while. Right, exactly. And even Jasper within the last couple of weeks in Alberta.
Oh, right.
Oh,
Right.
You know,
geez.
yeah. So I mean, this, it's been very destructive, and
I mean,
like I said, we
half of
don't know.
Southern Oregon's on fire right now. It's insane how many fires, if you go look on a fire map right now. I mean, they're doing it constantly. And the hurricanes
So
too. These hurricanes that, like the new
right,
normal.
exactly. Oh, it's all weather warfare, all of it. I'm wondering if all weather is weather warfare, but I don't know that, but I have my suspicions. So so getting back to your question of what's my grand picture is that there was this highly, highly technologically advanced civilization, and that there was an attack, at least one, probably several attacks on this perfectly tuned scientific and musical instrument that caused it to go haywire, and that people were buried where they were. Things just stopped, and all these giant bones that were being uncovered um, were disposed of in some way, shape, or form, and made to go away. Oh, and there's no giants, where the literature of the 19th century is filled with references to giants, scholarly articles and things like that. I do not believe that if there were cyclical cataclysms, that we would even be here today. Nobody would have survived. But there is occulting, so there is something going on with time. So could they be pulling things in, buildings whole? Could the footprint still be there? Um,
There's got to be
you
something,
know,
Michelle, because the one thing I bring up when people question the reset timeline, especially the short-term resets, like my father's family line, they can track it back to, England and stuff, and they see the family line without any discontinuation or disruption going back to the, 1400s or whatever. And of course, then you look at all the libraries with all the books from the 1400s, 1500s. Like there seems like, in other words, the narrative of a continuous historical timeline that we're told in conventional academia. They do have, some historical records there that seem pretty, primary in source. So how do we explain that, right?
I do have an explanation for that, actually,
Love to hear
Mike.
it.
Well, I'm like you. On both sides of my family, or all sides of my family, there is a documented lineage. And then there's the people that's like, well, my grandfather was an orphan. All these orphan stories come up. Okay.
So
So
is mine.
they got into that too, is what
Yeah.
happened. They got into that too. And so they replaced the original Black nobility, the original Moorish nobility, the families that went way back, they replaced them. And I'm going to talk about the 1540s here. This is one of the things that I pulled up. So King Henry VIII's dissolution of the monasteries took place from 1536 to 1541. And the monasteries that were the repositories of genealogical information, that were wealthy, that got destroyed. The original records got destroyed. And they created a new nobility. And the College of Arms was behind that. King Henry VIII, and I don't even know if he was real. I don't know that he was real. I think a lot of these historical figures may not have existed as we've been taught.
Seems like quite a character he was. I mean,
I think there's a lot of made up stuff. So I'm gonna let me share my screen again, and
So you're
I
saying
have done.
you're what you're proposing here is an actual physical explanation, physically
Yes.
replacing records, where I've kind of come to the conclusion from some more of around the simulation concepts of reality and how we're in a mind-centric reality, that these black magicians figured out how to twist the imagery of the reality of the actual code that we see, that our eyes see, and are actually so able to alter everything through that technology. And that can revert when we sort of descramble it, if you will. And it's interesting because we talk about, I don't know if you're familiar with the Ringing Cedars books and Anastasia, which is a
I've read the
phenomenal.
first one.
Yeah, yeah, where she talks about in book 7 how all this happened, and there was these six priests that took over, and she talks about the same thing. There was a worldwide civilization that was peaceful and one with the earth and had extremely advanced technology, and how they were taken over by a priest class that then knew how to use the technology of the image of projection through the mind to twist reality. So that would be quote unquote more like supernatural, but it's not supernatural. It's just natural. It's just the way reality works. But I like where you're going here with this, because this is a little more grounded and maybe easier for people to wrap their heads around.
So I'm open to all different kinds of possibilities. I have to kind of go where I've been guided and documented. But that question has come up before. How come I've got all this stuff going way, way back, myself included? Um, what's up?
Yeah.
And so what I have found is that King James the First of England and Six of Scotland was like their figurehead that rolled out how this land was acquired and things were done. So I'm going to go back in a minute to the 1540s that I just mentioned, but I think I cover it in here, so please bear with me. I wasn't prepared to go in this direction, but since you brought it up, it is important. Okay, how in the world did they rig the system and claim all this land and get this, you get that? And so one of the things that came up was the royal charters, and this really got underway with King James, and they were issued by a monarch under royal prerogative or letters patent. And then the royal prerogative is the idea that there's a body of customary authority, privilege, and immunity recognized in common and civil law jurisdictions within a monarchy as belonging to the sovereign that becomes widely vested in government. Because I'm king, I can do this. You see that with the president of the United States and the executive order and governors. They can bypass everything. So again, that's a stage and step in how this has all been rigged. I can do it. I can say this because I'm the Pope. I have infallibility when I talk from the chair. So they're creating everything essentially by one person saying, make it so. And then they had these letters patent, a type of legal instrument in the form of a published written order issued by a monarch or other head of state granting an office, right, monopoly, title, or status to a person or corporation. So they could be used for the creation of corporations or government offices, or for granting city status or coat of arms. Okay, so looked here at the Magna Carta a little bit. Royal charters historically used to make public laws, and that was in our historical narrative in 1215. But this is getting important because these corporations are becoming people in the law that can do things a human person is usually able to do, but are not literal people. so they're starting this whole thing, and chartered companies, and this is how places became colonies. Starting to give businesses like the drapers, and the drapers are a whole nother interesting area, what's going on with cloth, because that was really important, and replacing cloth. The original fabrics would have been gold, silk, that kind of thing, and they gave us synthetic clothing, which aren't good for us, and they can expose us to all kinds of poisons that way, and dyes and things like that. I'm gonna have to wait for Mike to come back here because we're getting into the College of Arms.
Yeah, so substituting corpses for corporations for living people. So we're living in one gigantic weekend at Bernie's here is what's happening.
Right.
And
So
of
the College
course,
of
that's of course why at birth they create a corporation in our name and then attach it to us, and we don't know it. So sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. So the College of Arms was said to have been first incorporated by a royal charter in March of 1484 under King Richard III, and then reincorporated in 1555 under Queen Mary I of England. And it's in the shadow of St. Paul's Cathedral, this location here on Queen Victoria Street in the city of London. So you've got the city of London, city of Washington, D.C., Vatican City. You've got the trifecta of the New World Order's city-states. And the motto, diligent and secret, is that of the code for the College of Arms. So why is it diligent and secret? And then I was looking into the laws of heraldic arms, which is interesting because it governs the bearing of arms, and which is the possession, use of, display of arms, also called coats of arms and armorial bearings. According to the law of heraldic arms, coats of arms and other similar emblems may be borne by ancestral right or descent from an ancestry through the male line, or a grant made to the user under due authority like the state or crown. Now, the verbiage right to bear arms is really interesting when you think of our Constitution. And that's a whole nother rabbit hole I'm not going to go down right now. But with regard to the law of arms, as part of the general law, such armorial bearings are considered a form of property and confer certain rights upon the grantee. And so I was looking into the British East India Company, which got kicked off under Queen Elizabeth I. These companies, these trading companies, were a big part of how everything was taken over by the New World Order folks. I'm just going to go through that. That's another subject.
Yeah, we've done whole shows with Steve Falconer around the Jesuits and all the symbology related to these characters.
Yep. And I'm going to bring in something else here in just a moment. So
not to mention everything that has been occulted and saved that's probably under the Vatican now, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And that, supposedly the Library of Alexandria being burned 3 times. They say anciently done, but I would assume you're probably going to say that was a Moorish, civilization, sanctuary of knowledge that was destroyed, probably in the reset.
That would be my viewpoint.
Yeah. I've been to Cordoba, Spain, got to see the amazing Moorish, it's now a cathedral they call it, but it's the mosque there. It's supposed to be the oldest, I think, Moorish structure in Europe. And it is quite breathtaking, I'll tell you, being there in person and feeling the energy in there.
Okay, so I think we're going to come to it here. I just have to scroll. So, heard of the Unum Sanctum?
Oh, yeah.
And
claims
that
all the
was,
souls for eternity.
so they're using these papal bulls that are issued by the infallible Pope that are laying the foundation for control over our very souls. So in the Unum Sanctum, the Pope declared that he has ultimate authority over all people, and that was necessary for every human being to belong to the Catholic Church for eternal salvation. Okay, so that was a public decree issued by the Pope. And that, you've got, these these images of Black people everywhere. And so we've got a kind of a Black Peter at the Vatican, no less. And then you have these Black Madonnas all over the place. Interesting. So we've got the Catholic Church coming in, and then we have next Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. And it's interesting that in the background of the portrait of Ferdinand and Isabella, you have the Moor's heads here. And that's the actual flag today of Sardinia and Corsica. Corsica actually has one Moor's head, but Sardinia has 4. And you've got statues of Moors all over Europe, for example. Then you have all this horrible stuff that started under those monarchs of Spain. You've got the Spanish Inquisition, and what's that known for? Just absolute torture and brutality of people that don't go along with the orthodox beliefs of the church. This is normalizing this torture. And we consider it normal because that's what we're taught. What's a Christian church going around doing things like that? Burning people at the stake for the heresy, especially, you look at the Cathars in France. And anybody believed that we're here as a fractal of the Creator having our own experience. Things like that. So you have the fall of Granada in January 2nd of 1492. And then that same year, you have Columbus leaving Spain on his first voyage to find a westward route to Asia, that we're told from, since we were kids. And then in 1493, the Borgia Pope Alexander VI authorized the land grab of the Americas in the Interest Terra Papal Bull. And that gave legal doctrines regarding claims of empire in the New World, and assigned to Castile and Spain the exclusive right to acquire territory, to trade in, or even approach the lands lying west of the meridian, situated 100 leagues west of the Azores and Cape Verde Islands. Okay.
Borges,
another
psychopath. Borges, another psychopath.
So the Pope is making it so. And then they're shipping all of this gold from the New World back to the Old World for a long time. They're just scooping it up. Again, this is our narrative. I don't know where real history begins and fabricated is, whatever. You know what I mean? Where real events start. Because I think at some point the controllers wrote themselves into it, and at some point history was completely fabricated and based on original people and events and things like that. But I think they've given us a fake history. Let's see. So I'm looking at colonization here. I'm hoping I can come across the answer to what I think happened with the nobility, and I'm not sure where it is in here, so please. Okay, so I was going to bring this up because there's a lot going on in that 1540 time period. So the dissolution of the monasteries took place between 1536 and 1541, and that was Henry VIII saying, okay, boys, go get them, and just tearing apart the monasteries in the United Kingdom. And what that looks like, and as I've been there before, so like Glastonbury Abbey is a good example. You know, again, this is what we've been told as to one of those places that was just destroyed during the dissolution of the monasteries. And so that was what was supposedly going on during that period of time. So 1540, the Jesuits are formed by Pope Paul III. You know, we've got the exploration of San Diego Bay by the Spanish explorer Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo in 1542. Just gonna this is what I'm talking about with King Henry VIII. Disbanded the approximately 850 monasteries, convents, and friaries during that time, and there were none left at the end of it. Their income was taken and assets disposed of, and in many cases, like that of Glastonbury Abbey, the buildings on the property were left in ruins. Monasteries were formerly the repositories of local genealogical records, and from then on, the College of Arms mentioned in part 1 of this blog was responsible for the recording and maintenance of genealogical records. Okay. With regards to evidence for the creation of a new nobility taking place during King Henry VIII's reign, it was said that the College of Arms, at no time since its establishment, was the college in higher estimation nor in fuller employment than in this reign. In 1530, King Henry VIII conferred the duty of heraldic visitation on the college, that tours of inspection between 1530 and 1688 around England, Wales, and Ireland to register and regulate the coats of arms of nobility, gentry, and boroughs, and to record pedigrees. And actually 1688 was the year that the Sumner side of my family was said to have come to North America. I also have Mayflower connections and, you know, other early settlers. Okay. Also, the Court of Wards and Liveries was established starting in 1540 during the reign of King Henry VIII by 2 acts of Parliament, the Court of Wards Act of 1540 and the Wards and Liveries Act of 1541. It was established around the issues of practical matters relating to the Crown's right of wardship and livery of young orphaned heirs, where their father had been a tenant-in-chief of the Crown, including having rights over the deceased estates, including income and land, so this special court also administered a system of levying and collecting feudal dues. Does this mean that there were so many orphaned heirs that they had to establish a special court to handle them? I find this information about the Court of Wards and Liveries very intriguing, with the Crown taking over the estates and rights of orphaned heirs, and would love to know more about what was going on here that is not found in the historical record. Who were they, and how were they orphaned, and why would this be important? Okay. Go a little bit through the history there, but so around this same time as the 1600s, which is what I'm leading to with this, and King James I and VI, is that there were like the first lord of, the first earl of, and they started showing up about this time, at same time as Jamestown, the colony of Jamestown. And there was also a colony up in Maine that was established around that same time in 1607 that didn't last, supposedly. And so this is an example. Another member of and beneficiary of the Council of New England was William Alexander, the first Earl of Stirling. And then he created in Nova Scotia the baronetage of Nova Scotia, and it was said to have been formed in 1625 by King James as a means to settle the plantation of Nova Scotia by creating baronets who would in turn support 6 colonists for 2 years for a certain amount of money and pay William Alexander a certain amount as a charter holder. So this is how they're starting to take over these places and make money and claim them. And you have the families showing up, like the Forbes family. And the Forbes family owns a small chain of islands called the Elizabeth Islands. And this is right in that area that's leading into Long Island, Montauk and Long Island Sound. That whole coastal area, Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket and Fisher's Island and Plum Island, Block Island. It's all small, I'm going to say crappy land because it is, but it's prized by the elites. They want this place. And this is part of the alignment that I found with the Philadelphia experiment from Cornwall, with all the ruined land going through here. But the Forbes show up here. The Forbes family shows up here close to Martha's Vineyard and Cape Cod. And it was colonized in 1641. And, so we've got, who are the Forbes? Well, they were, John Carey is part of that family. They were merchants, opium and tea. That's where they got their fortune from. And that's where these early wealthy families were getting their money, was they were merchants and they were trading in drugs. So that theme has been with us for a long time. And I've got more examples of this. I didn't really highlight it here because that wasn't what this was about, but I've highlighted in other places. These rich, wealthy families were getting money from the drug trade and financing their stuff.
Well, and I always found it really interesting, Michelle, that a lot of these families just kind of popped up in the last couple hundred years, and then they explain because it's the new merchant class and mercantilism that erupted, and then they started challenging the royal families that had the long lineage. But this could be another way that they've masked sort of the takeover, right, of these new, and where did these new people come from? I guess that's the question, that come and took over. And where did they come from? Extraterrestrial place?
I'm not really sure, but I do think that there were these bloodline families, whether you call it Luciferian or Archontic or whatever, that there were that they found a way to incarnate into what were apparently human bodies.
Yep.
Because I don't see that.
Yeah, there's a lot to that, and why they're so keen on blood, especially, and maintaining those bloodlines, because there's a science behind the incarnation there, and of course also them being trapped here because their soul isn't able to evolve out of it. Yeah, there's a lot there. I love all these rabbits. It's so fun. It's so fun, and I think you're doing a wonderful job showing, how this worked through the supposed time, but really we're looking at it with different eyes now, right? You start to develop your true historic eyes and seeing through all the lies in this way, which is a really good exercise to do.
Yeah.
I also think we're going to need a part 2 here.
Yeah, I agree. We're coming up on 2.5 hours. And
let me make one last point before we end. I want to talk about the 1540 timeframe. So I mentioned the dissolution of the monasteries between 1536 and 1541. I mentioned Pope Paul III forming the Jesuits in 1540. In 1541, Gerardus, I love to show pictures, but since we're just wrapping up, let me, I had that stuff pulled up. So sorry about that, but they created the new royalty is what I'm saying. And they created the new genealogies. And I think that's why some of us have family lines that have documentation that go way back.
Got it.
But the original families were Moors. And let me finish that train of thought, and then my apologies.
Is that where we get also, I mean, even traditionally we get ideas like the Black Irish, right? Which is interesting because that's like sort of blending the Moors with the Celtic tradition, the Phoenician tradition.
So they would be like landholders. The original coats of arms were Moors. And so this is like one that I'm looking for. It's kind of a funny looking one with the wings on it. But again, I think we're talking higher consciousness. So to me, the wings would indicate, like the wings, the feathered serpent, the whole idea that we have a spiritual experience that gets us into our higher consciousness, and then we have that connection with our higher selves, with the divine, however you want to look at it. So you have these Moors, the original coats of arms, and because they're not going to let me do that. Just trying to get that picture bigger. So they were replacing these. They were replacing this royalty, and with something that you couldn't really recognize as Moorish. And that's where you get something like this, where you have the suit of armor. You can't tell who's underneath that, and that's what I think the new College of Arms was doing. They were replacing these original arms bearers. Okay, so just the last points on 1541. So in 1541, Gerardus Mercator produced his first globe, and that was received with acclaim and sold in large numbers. And then in 1569, his map was considered to be the first where sailing courses on the sphere were mapped to the plane map, allowing for a correction of the chart to be more useful for sailors. So what started happening with that map is that ley lines started to disappear from maps. And in that particular one, they were still on land, or they were still on the sea, but not on land. They went away. Ley lines went away. They were on older maps. And now all we have are the longitude and latitude. And the only other thing I want to mention, so Pope Paul III also established the Inquisition in 1542. And then in 1543, Nicholas Copernicus published On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres. And that was when we went from the Earth-centered model to the heliocentric model. That was all during that period of time, 1540
Wow.
to
Interesting.
1543.
Pretty important time. Wow. And you think about latitude and longitude, it's all very linear in thinking versus the very much fractal sort of nature around when you look at the ley line grid, how it's just kind of, well, it's sacred.
And the world needs it to function. We have to have some way of getting from point A to point B and have planes work, and it serves a purpose, and that's where we get the coordinate system.
I think that's the key takeaway for all this discussion, is that we have to know how things function. And if we know how things function in the external realm, we know how we function. And we also know that that function can be usurped if we're put to sleep by people, black magicians, we'll just call them, that manipulate the ethers, our individual biological ethers, as well as the ethers of the realm, which are the complete creative mechanism, and that water element that translates into what we think of as experience in the materialistic nature of our realm. If we get to know how all that works and that we have the power within ourselves, then we do not have to be victims of that. And that's what we're really waking up to, is that's what they're trying to cover up. I like FPV Angel because he really goes into the functional aspects of the realm in that way, so that we know that, there's no victims here, but, it's a matter of choice too. So here we are. This is a brilliant discussion, and I really would love to have a part two. There's so many questions I wanted to interject along the way, but I didn't want to interrupt you too much. So thank you so much for all this.
You're very welcome. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information. I've been doing this consistently for 6 years, and I can get overwhelmed with it. So I
Yeah.
I hope it was clear.
I would love to connect you
Oh,
with
absolutely.
Rachel. I'd love to connect you with Rachel Vaughn as well, Michelle. We did a show with her a few months back about the ley lines, and she's doing a whole process where essentially reigniting them, turning them all back on in a way through specific modalities, singing to them and meditation, and this through groups getting together all across the land and doing it together. And she can see them, she has the ability to see them. And so I think you guys could have a really cool talk, and I think you guys would really hit it off. But I'm under the firm belief that as this great awakening continues, they're all going to really start to light up, and everyone's going to start seeing them, and things are going to start happening. Technologies are going to start working that we forgot we had, inner technologies, psychic stuff, all sorts of things. And then that's what they are completely frightened of and scared of, and why they pushed out the 2020 psyop and trying to get everybody with that poison in them to block those abilities. It's all part of their nefarious plan that's falling left and right, as we may not even have an election in November. We probably will, but it's going to be a total joke. We'll
We'll
see.
see.
I
mean,
hope
they
not,
only
actually.
they only succeeded by operating in the dark. If we
Yeah.
couldn't see what they were doing, and that's why they are throwing everything at us. And they knew that it couldn't be stopped. They knew it was going to happen. And, it's a very challenging time to be here because of the psychological abuse that I talked about at the beginning, which I was going to go into more in this, but we can save that for the next time. We've been gaslit. It's like our default mode is this abuse, and it can be a challenge
Gaslighting.
sometimes.
Gaslighting is the worst form of torture, period. Some of us started going into these areas long ago and just, constantly ridiculed by peers and family. And yeah, it's very frustrating. But the cat's out of the bag. It's too late.
Yep.
And now we get to make our choice.
Right. So, but like you say, it's becoming aware that there is a choice. And
Yes.
I totally agree. They're on their way out, and we're just seeing it, and they're kicking and screaming and thrashing and, using whatever they've got left. But I've believed for a long time that they're not going to get away with this, and I know a lot of people that have been awake and know how scary it is are concerned about that kind of thing. But, of them getting away with it, but I don't. I do not believe that.
The only thing they have left is to tip over the whole game board, which is what they're trying to do right now.
Yeah.
Why do they call it gaslighting? Because that's their technology. Lighting gases, combustion, where that's ending, and we're bringing back the true etheric energies and the real technology. So the gaslighting will not be lasting for much longer.
Regeneration versus explosion.
Exactly.
Yeah. But it has had an effect.
Oh, yes.
That's my point.
Got that right. Well, Michelle, thanks so much. And I have your YouTube link in the show notes below. Is there anywhere else that we can send people to follow you and find your stuff?
I'm going to put two things. One is the link to my website.
And I will add that to the show notes as well.
And there's other thing I want to add besides that. So just bear with me.
Are you throwing that in our chat, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna come back. I've got two. So
and please tell us what that website is now for those listening and watching.
Okay. So it's piercingtheveilofelusion.com, and I just put that in the chat.
Great.
And then I wanted to share a link to a collaborative effort, and the author of it is Stephanie McPeak-Peterson, and she's brilliant. And It's a collaborative effort with myself and Elin Carlson and
Oh,
Shalimar Bay.
Elin.
And mhm,
Oh, Elin was at Music in Sky this year. She
mhm,
sang a world premiere of The Best Apocalypse Ever, written by Music Conspiracy Guru. She's fantastic.
she is. So just check it out. It's got a lot of potential. Right now it's in ebook form, but it's written as something that can be produced either into an audiobook or even stage or something else. But it's really cool. And it's definitely filled with jewels of truth. But it's kind of going back to how a lot of this hidden history has been presented to us, which is in these masks, which started around Elizabethan times and King James the First and all of that. And there's a ton of hidden history in masks like Ben Jonson's. And so we played on that, and it's features Prince Tamino from the Magic Flute portaling through time to where the three muses of the lyre, played by myself, Elin, and Stephanie in the book, are at their RV in a area near Mount Shasta. And so it involves the interplay between Tamino and the muses and the fates. And it's really cool. So I just encourage you to check it out and see what you think. And all proceeds are going towards future plans. We'd like to turn it into more.
Nice.
Beautiful. I've already added those links to the show notes for the YouTube stream here, and we'll get them on Rumble and Unite and Odyssey. And then, of course, this does go out as an audio podcast as well, wherever you like to listen. So we'll get this out far and wide. Michelle, thanks so much for your time today. This has been truly a pleasure. It's been such a fun ride, and I look forward to further discussions on Alfacast.
You're very welcome. And I'm glad, Bar, to know that you know about the Washita.
Yes.
That's a harder sell
Definitely.
usually because people don't even know they exist. So cool.
Yeah, that's why when I started following some of your work and I saw that you were on that thread, I was tickled. I thought, oh, this is going to be great fun.
Awesome. And yeah, we'll actually have Ashley Stinnett on for Halloween. We're doing a big Bigfoot
Woo-hoo!
show on Halloween, and she's actually I just saw this email actually to bring in another I think maybe is it her mentor or someone she's worked with, Barb Shoop, who also has a lot of amazing stories. So I only bring that up because you had just done a really cool interview with her. Really recommend that. That was a really fun chat. And maybe when we have you back on, we'll touch a little bit on Sasquatch because you have some interesting ideas around
Is
that
he
as
a
well.
descendant of the Moors as well?
Other
Way
way
before.
around. Other way around.
Oh, okay.
According to
Ancient.
Richard Smith.
Teaser. Glad to have you back.
I'm not an experiencer, but I am open, very, very open that there's something very real with Sasquatch and other beings along those lines, and that they are at that higher level of consciousness, and they've been patiently waiting for us so that they can interact with us.
Well,
And Ashley and
we'll
Barb
definitely have some.
are involved in that.
Yeah.
We'll definitely have some stories to swap next time.
Indeed. And I don't know if since you've spoken with Ashley, but the one concurrent theme I'm hearing is when you start engaging with people who are experiencing and communicating directly with them, you start to get other signs from them. So not sure if you've seen anything on your doorstep or anything like that, but Danny Katz has. So who interviewed her a while back. So I'm like, okay, bring it on, boys. Cause I feel like I'm sorry, I know we're going to run out of time here, but our house was being visited for a while. I do believe that. And so my wife actually put security cameras up because we had a stint of thefts, unfortunately, in the neighborhood, and then they went away. So, but I'm interested to re-engage with them. So just curious if you've had since you talked to Ashley, anything pop up?
Yeah,
I
we're
haven't,
at
but
ground zero.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they've been on my radar
Yeah.
on this journey, and I totally believe it. And the documentary that she is in is called A Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot,
Mhm.
or Paranormal Bigfoot, A Flash of Beauty. I'm not sure what order that's in, but that's excellent.
Flash of Beauty, Paranormal Bigfoot. I do have that on my list to watch.
It's
And then
excellent.
the film you watched that inspired you, because what was that one? That's actually a
So,
scripted live action film, right?
right. It's produced by Christopher Munch. Um, and I saw that on Gaia.com a couple of years ago. I haven't watched Gaia for a while for a variety of reasons.
Oh, yeah.
The main one, I was having buffering problems, but then the story comes up, they were infiltrated too. So I don't know. But anyway,
Yeah.
I kind of got off that. But Letters from the Big Man, I think is what it's called.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I want to see that too. That looks like a fun one.
Yeah,
So.
it's good.
Okay, Michelle,
it's good.
thanks so much. We'll have you back on. We'll touch base and figure it out maybe in the late fall or early winter or something. And really enjoy this. This is some of our favorite stuff. Really appreciate you. Keep up the great work. And hey, guys, remember to get outside, get your feet in the dirt, go plant something, go for a hike, show Mother Nature some love. She'll show it right back to you tenfold. That's the true technology. That is the true nature of us. So go engage. And I'm off to Oz. We won't be on Alfacast next week. Taking a week off. It's kind of good we went long today. Give people some time. Give people a long show, Bear. Enjoy your time off, Bear. And we'll see you when I get back. We may be doing one from Oz with Tom Barnett. So we'll let you guys know.
And I'll be on with you tomorrow on our group chat.
Yes, indeed. Okay, guys. Thanks so much. Have a great one. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Michelle.
Take care.